Okay, so what I'm going to try and do now is demonstrate a problem that we found when we have 60i HD interlaced video and we want to downscale it to 60i standard definition interlaced video for use on DVD or whatever. So we're here in Vegas 10.0e on the 32-bit version, Windows XP. We have the preview quality set to best full, and on the right click we've got the scale video to fit preview window set, and we've got two test files that Bob has created. They're both AVC HD. One of them is 50i and one is 60i, and they're created from generated media, which makes it easy to assess the results of the test accurately. So let's drag the first of those down to the timeline. Let me just zoom out a little bit with the mouse wheel, and let's match our project properties to that file. Okay, so you can see it's HD 1080 50i, upper field first, 25 frame rate, and I've got my full resolution rendering quality set to best and the deinterlace method set to interpolate. If we just select that loop and play it, you can see that it's just a black ball bouncing around on the screen. Okay, so let's first just render that directly to standard definition without doing any nesting. So render as, video for Windows, PAL DV widescreen, and let's call that SD 50i from HD 50i direct, and render that. And if I refresh my Explorer window, I can see that's been created. Now let's save this file and call it child 50. We're going to use this as the child project in a nest. Save that. Let's open a new project, and let's refresh the Explorer window and drag that project down to the timeline so it becomes nested. And now let's match the properties again, the project properties, to the original AVC HD file. And now let's render from the nested file. So again, PAL DV widescreen, and let's here say, call it nested. Okay, now let's open a new project to look at the results. I won't bother saving. So let's drag our directly rendered file to the timeline, and let's drag the one that was rendered from the nested file, the nested project, and we'll match the project properties to PAL DV widescreen. But what we want to do now is actually look at the separate fields, and we can do this by doubling the frame rate to 50. And let's set the field order to none, so it's progressive scan. And let's zoom in on this timeline. If you don't zoom in, it's possible you might skip frames, which will mislead you when you're trying to assess the results. So I've zoomed in now on the directly rendered file, and just using the arrow keys on the keyboard, going backwards and forwards, we can see that every time I press the arrow key, the ball moves, and it moves an equal amount. There's no combing or anything. And this is what we want to see. That's the correct result. Now let's do the same for the one that was generated from the nested project, and again exactly the same result. Every time I press the arrow key, the ball moves, and it moves an equal amount, and there's no combing. So everything seems to be working correctly when we're using 50i footage. Now let's have a look what happens with 60i. So let's open a new project again, not bother saving. We drag the 60i AVC HD file down to the timeline. You see some shadow here because the project properties aren't matched to it. So let's do that. Let's match the properties to that original file. So everything's like it was before, but now we've got 29.97 as the frame rate. Apply, and let's render that directly. So call it 60i. Again, we don't want to use PAL DV widescreen now. We want to use NTSC DV widescreen. Okay, so let's render that. And let's save this project as child 60i. Open a new project. Refresh the Explorer window, drag the 60i Vegas project down to the timeline so it becomes nested. Match the properties to that original 60i HD file. Everything's the same as it just was. Apply, okay, and then we render again. Call it nested. Again, NTSC DV widescreen this time, which matches our frame rate. Render that. Okay, so we've got our two 60i standard definition files now to compare. So let's open another new project. Not bother saving. And we set the project properties of this one. Firstly, we set it to NTSC DV widescreen. Now let's double the frame rate again, so we separate the fields and set it to progressive scan. And first of all, drag the 60i directly rendered file down to the timeline, and also the nested file. Now let's zoom in on the timeline again, and using the arrow keys, everything's looking good on the directly rendered file. Every time I press the arrow key, the ball moves. It moves an equal amount. There's no combing or anything. Now if we zoom in on the one that was created from the nested project, now we have a problem. The ball only moves every other time I press the key, only on alternate presses. So what that really means is that the file has been rendered as progressive footage rather than interlaced footage. Now if you look very closely, there are some very minor differences around the edge of the ball. Not sure why those would happen, but the overall effect is that we've got progressive footage, and we shouldn't have progressive footage. We should have interlaced footage. So if you're someone who's nesting 60i footage into a Vegas timeline and then downscaling it to create NTSC DVDs, this is going to cause you some problems, and it's going to affect the quality of the footage. I'll just try something quickly, is to not scale the output in the preview window, so we can just see on a one-to-one level what it looks like, to make sure there's no combing or anything being hidden by the downscaling in the preview window. And there isn't there for the nested version, and for the direct version, again, there's no combing or anything. So the fact that we're downscaling for the preview doesn't seem to affect the overall result of the test. I'll put links to the two source files that Bob created into the video description down below the video on YouTube, so that you can try this yourselves.